Hi everybody, don't mind my shaky hand. We just got done volunteering. My hands are very sore. But today we're going to just dive into a new book. It's called Sacred Cow by Diana Rodgers and Robb. So the book kind of goes really deep into the meat industry, specifically cows, agriculture, and notes both the kind of human impact and environmental impact that meat has on the world. And kind of as a former vegetarian, I've been a vegetarian for over 10 years, was at least. It was really interesting to read as I kind of dove back into the meat eating world. Just as a reminder, I do read everything as an unbiased person because I'm in it to take the most relevant information and give it to you. So here's just kind of part one of Sacred Cow about agriculture, protein, kind of plant-based versus meat-based, and kind of how that whole thing started. So contrary to the popular narrative, red meat is one of the most nutrient-dense, bioavailable foods available. And by bioavailable, I mean easily converts in your body versus like taking a supplement that has to go through a whole process for it in order to be absorbed, and then only gets maybe absorbed 10% of the time. It is kind of one of the greatest distinguishers between poor and wealthy in developed and developing countries, if you can eat red meat or not, because it does help a lot with development of children as well. And although grass-fed meat may be superior from a sustainability perspective, current research indicates that it's only marginally different from conventionally raised meat when it comes to health and nutrients, because all cattle are raised on grass and farms and like just grasslands and everything like that. They're not fed like corn and things like that until they're being finished to like fatten them up over like maybe a month's time. But every cow that you see is a grazing animal. So that's what it's going to do. It will graze until the very end of its life, and then it will be sent to a processing plant to kind of fatten up after that. And that's kind of how that works. So all in all, just kind of make sure that your meat is organic when you can. Try your best to shop locally from your local butcher or farmer's market when you're buying meat. That way you really know where it's coming from and you can talk to those farmers. As we entered the industrial era and moved into cities, meat production and slaughter was kind of pushed farther and farther out of sight with industrial agriculture. And jumping into modern history, the human lifespan, particularly in developed nations like the US, is declining. Chronic degenerative diseases are rapidly increasing, and despite knowing more about nutrition than ever before, our obesity and diabetes rates still continue to soar, and that is because of the food supply. Despite the nutritional benefits of meat, plant proteins are also more labeled as like the better for you. They're pure, they're clean, you know, Impossible Burgers are really going out there now, Beyond Meat, all of these things, except if you read the back of the ingredients, they're just as unhealthy for you as Doritos. They're not anything that you're like, everything is super hella highly processed, and it's still not something that we should be eating in mass amounts, especially for those that do not eat meat, because it's not in its, again, most pure available form. You'd be better off eating tofu or tempeh and things like that to help that protein content get up, because both those things do have high protein. And they're not highly processed. It's just the one or maybe two ingredients that's like soy, salt, and things like that. Nothing is added to it to make it seem like it's a burger or a piece of chicken or whatever the case may be. So that's kind of on that. And the meat and animal products are really labeled like dirty, unhealthy, and sinful. Like, we know how much meat goes on recall these days, but it's mostly due to factory farming, not really due to those that are processed, you know, on single farms, and then they send them to a plant that they trust, and then they get that meat back and then they sell it to us, and that type of thing. So on a calorie by calorie basis, animal products provide far more nutrition than any plant material, and raw unprocessed plants require far more energy and resources to digest. So animal products are kind of highly prized. Worldwide, traditional healthy foods like meat and traditional fats are being abandoned in favor of ultra-processed seed oils and highly refined wheat, corn, and soy. Highly processed and refined foods are becoming more common on supermarket shelves and in our homes, at least here in the West. Food products have taken the place of whole fresh foods, which is really what we do need. And for the first time in our history, humans in the West are overfed, and at the same time, we are undernourished. So we're not actually taking in nutrients. We're just taking in soy, wheat, corn, etc. Today, in what we can consider a post-domestic society, Many consider the act of eating meat barbaric. It's labeled as unhealthy, unsustainable, and morally reprehensible. And sometimes these attitudes can stem toward our lack of connection to food production and nature itself. But government guidelines that prop up industrial agriculture and further kind of entrench bias research are also to blame. So dietary fat, that was being vilified, particularly fats of animal origin. The main solution then was to consume more carbs and vegetable oils. Conveniently, the government also began subsidizing corn and other commodities that are easily transformed into hyper-palatable, shelf-stable, high-profit margin junk food. The depiction of red meat as our main dietary foe plays nicely into our current fears about a warming planet and the ethical and sustainable considerations of factory farming. Every animal has a biologically appropriate diet. That also includes us as humans. Humans appear to thrive on a diet that is more nutrient dense than that of our great ape cousins. We evolved to have more real estate in the small intestine, which preferentially absorbs nutrient dense, highly digestible foods. Relative to other primates, the fiber fermenting portion of our digestive tract, our colon, is comparatively smaller. So varied food sources provide a more nutrient-rich diet, which is kind of what we need. Our bodies naturally want variety, and we get bored of eating the same thing all the time. No one wants to have chicken and rice and broccoli every single night. That's so boring. And you're also not getting all the nutrients that you need. Also, with a larger small intestine, we're adapted to eating nutrient-dense foods like meat and cooked starches. That's also why a lot of times raw vegetables can sometimes hurt our stomach and make us really bloated. And then when we cook those same vegetables, we are not left with that feeling. It helps break down some of the plant's protective barriers against our body and helps us to actually absorb the nutrients in them. The only things I recommend eating raw are carrots. Everything else you can cook. But again, our body likes the variety. So the varied food sources provide a more nutrient-rich diet. It's what we need. We need nutrients that are found in both plants and animals. B12 is one of them. I'll talk about that a little bit later. That is only found in red meat. So if you are a vegetarian or vegan, make sure that you are supplementing with B12. And I'm talking a high amount, like a high amount. Because if you're doing like 4,000% of the daily amount, you're only absorbing maybe 10% of that, which is still not what it needs to be up to for just functional living. I was told by my regular doctors that I was fine, and then I went to a functional doctor and they found so much deficiency, so many vitamin deficiencies, so many mineral deficiencies just from being a vegetarian and not doing it properly and not taking the vitamins and minerals that I needed to with it. Although I was eating a whole food diet, I was still not getting what I needed to be and ended up being undernourished and malnourished. So many people also think that we get too much protein and that too much protein can be dangerous. In reality, we're not eating anywhere close to 265 pounds of meat per person per year. In 2016, when adjusted for loss, because we do have to talk about the loss of meat, Americans ate an estimated 1.8 ounces of beef per day, 1.4 ounces of pork per day, and 2.6 ounces of poultry per day. Since 1970, our intake of beef has actually declined from 2.7 ounces per person a day to 1.8 in 2016. Poultry has doubled. So we're eating more chicken and turkey, less beef. We've increased our intake of caloric sweeteners, and our intake of grain products has gone up by about 30%. And I'm not talking about like pearl barley when grains. I'm talking about like ultra processed foods that are made from wheat and corn. We tripled our intake of ultra processed seed oils. So your canola oil, your safflower oil, your sunflower oil, anything that's not olive, coconut, or avocado is an ultra processed seed oil. If you go onto the internet and look up how much protein you should eat, the numbers you're going to find are 56 grams a day for men and 46 grams per day for women. This is also what most health professionals are going to tell you. Remember that this is the minimum requirement, just like 2,000 calories a day that we hear is the minimum calorie content, not the maximum. It is not the optimal amount in order to thrive or in order to be functional. Humans don't really need protein. We need the amino acids, the building blocks of protein, and meat has the perfect balance of those amino acids plus micronutrients that plants don't have. The dietary reference intakes by the Institute of Medicine sets no upper limit level for your protein intake on the basis of chronic disease risk, because high protein intake has not been found to have a detrimental effect on chronic diseases. Your body needs protein, and if you don't get enough through your diet, your body will start breaking down your muscles and other tissues in order to get it, because your muscles are made from protein, so you'll just become less strong. And then it will break down your muscles. That's going to lead to osteopenia and all of those lovely things as you get older, where your bones are breaking and you're just feeling like meh. So make sure you're eating your protein. This also leads to muscle wasting and weakness. Immune function decreases because protein is required for antibiotics. You also need protein to make enzymes and carry oxygen to tissues. Low protein can cause lethargy. Low protein is also associated with hair loss, brittle nails, cold hands and feet. Low protein can cause weight gain. B12 deficiency, which is common again in vegetarians and vegans, has been shown as an independent risk factor for coronary artery disease and serious neurological disorders in infants of vegan mothers. This is only because sometimes as a vegan mom, they will also push their veganism onto their child, who doesn't really have a choice. And again, if you're not giving your baby what it needs, it's not going to be able to grow properly, and will have deficiencies and other issues. Higher level of protein are effective for weight loss. It's really good for a really quick body comp of yourself, to kind of switch it from that fat metabolism to a muscle metabolism. If the food you're eating is ultra processed, low in protein, but high in calories and carbohydrates, the brain is going to tell you to keep eating that food until you reach your protein minimum. So if you don't have your protein, you're just going to keep eating, and you're not going to stop until your body says, okay, I finally had it, thank you. Because protein is highly satiating, when we increase our protein intake, our overall caloric intake generally reduces. Protein is the most satisfying and satiating of the macronutrients, and intake of 15 to 30% of total calories can be pretty helpful in regulating appetite by increasing leptin sensitivity, which is your hunger hormone, and inducing weight loss and increasing blood sugar control. Also good for those of you that have insulin resistance, especially those of you that have PCOS, because that also includes insulin resistance in that as well. Think 4 to 6 ounces of animal protein per meal. Again, if you are a vegetarian or a vegan, just make sure you're having those cleaner sources of protein, your beans, your soy, your tempeh, those types of things. If you're a vegetarian that eats eggs, eggs are going to be really good. If you are a vegetarian that has dairy, dairy is also going to have some protein in it as well. So kind of hopefully you understand and take away from this the idea that too much protein is not based on science, but more on a feeling that meat by nature is gluttonous and unhealthy, which it's not. It's just the factory farming that is kind of gross. And we'll go into all of that throughout this book. This is just kind of the first part of this book. We'll probably be doing this book for about 3-4 weeks, and then we'll dive into a little bit more of women's health after that. But if you're ever wondering also how much protein you should be eating, you can always track your protein and just see where you're at. I always recommend 100 grams of protein flat out. If you're only getting 40 in now, please go slowly up. You will have a stomach ache and you will feel very gassy initially. And then that will go away as your digestive system gets used to having enough protein to fuel your body. But I always recommend 100 grams just to kind of start off and see how you feel and go from there. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop a comment below. Otherwise, that is a little bit on Sacred Cow.